friends, my name's Katie. I'm so glad to be here today. Quite honestly, I have been feeling incredibly anxious, and I bet a lot of you out there are feeling really anxious as well. We are living in uncertain times, my friends, and I feel like I've had a hard time focusing on books right now. As we speak, today is Saturday, March 14th, and there has been an outbreak of the coronavirus pretty much around the world. This week it was declared a pandemic, and there's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear, and I am feeling that fear. Just last month I was prescribed some antidepressants for postpartum depression/anxiety, so this is not boding well for my anxiety. I can feel myself kind of spiraling, and it's not a healthy place to be. I'm not so much worried for myself, but I'm worried for my family. I have a lot of people in my family who are vulnerable, who have underlying issues, and that makes me so nervous. I have not been able to focus on reading this week. Every day the news just feels a little bit more scary and things feel a little bit more out of control. And even though I haven't been able to focus on reading, being a reader, I love to be surrounded by books, and I love to be surrounded by books that bring me comfort. As I was preparing for a video this week, I actually, once again, am going to be putting off my secret TBR video. First of all, editing it was just too much this week. There's a lot to edit, and I couldn't even focus on that. But also, I felt weird doing a video like that without even addressing this thing that feels so all-encompassing for so many people right now. So instead of doing that, I decided that I would do a video about books that bring comfort in a time of uncertainty. So I have a pile of books right here. Obviously, this is such a personal thing. So while I would certainly recommend any of these books might not bring comfort to someone else. And what brings someone comfort looks entirely different for different people. So these are the books that bring me comfort, and I hope that if you haven't read them, you pick one of these up, and I hope that it will bring you comfort too. I'm going to set down my tea now because I can't hold my tea and show you the books, but there's also something about having a nice cup of tea in my hands to calm my nerves. Maybe it's because you have to stop and take a sip and just focus on your breathing a little bit. As with a lot of videos like this, I feel like maybe I repeat myself, maybe I mention the same books a lot, but you know what? Comfort books are all about returning to our friends and finding comfort in familiar stories. So you know what? It is what it is. The first book that I'm going to recommend is obviously Anne of Green Gables. This is about a little orphan girl who is adopted by two older siblings, Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, on Prince Edward Island. It takes place at the end of the 19th century, turn of the 20th century, somewhere around there. And Anne is very precocious. She's talkative. She's imaginative. She comes from a hard life. But this book doesn't focus on the hardships of Anne's past. This book focuses on her indomitable spirit and her ability to find hope and beauty in the world around her no matter what. And I return to this book again and again and again and find comfort in its pages. Ellen Montgomery would just be perfect for this time because her books are just filled with hope and beauty of language, the beauty of people and characters. There is just such an overriding warmth in her stories. So if you have read Anne, but you haven't read any other Ellen Montgomery and you want a place to start, I would highly recommend The Blue Castle. This is Ellen Montgomery's one of two adult novels that she wrote. That doesn't mean it feels a whole lot different, but her main character in this book, Valancy, is a little bit older. So it does read a little bit more adult in that respect. It's kind of a romance, but it's also kind of just a book about Valancy learning to stand up for herself, once again facing adversity and overcoming it. In this book, Valancy has a family that is incredibly overbearing, and one day she gets some news that changes her perspective in an instant, and she decides that she is no longer going to live by her family's rules. She's going to go out and experience the world for herself, and it's a beautiful story. And also, I mean, is this cover not gorgeous? Even just talking about it makes me want to reread it. I read it a couple years ago and I still think about it so often. This is my favorite Ella Montgomery book aside from Anne of Green Gables. The Blue Castle is just wonderful and completely underrated. I don't hear many people talking about it, and it is worth every second of your time. And it smells delicious too. I feel like in my last few videos I have smelled all my books. Maybe I should just continue to do that. It can be my thing. That's where I'm going to end with Ella Montgomery, but really you could pick up any of her books. Those are just my two biggest recommendations. Another all-time favorite comfort read is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. Reading this book is like sipping a warm cup of tea. I think what's interesting about a lot of these books that I mention is that not everything in these books is perfect. This is a World War II / post-World War II story. Not everything that happens in this book is light and fluffy and wonderful. In fact, there's a lot of hardships talked about in this book. But I think a theme that you'll see in a lot of these, and I think something that brings us comfort, is when we see people facing adversity and we watch them band together and overcome it together, finding community in any way that we can, leaning on each other, and what it means to really be human in times of crisis. This book, while it deals with heavy topics, particularly the German occupation on the island of Guernsey during World War II and post-World War II, the story that it tells is so beautiful and warm-hearted. Like, I am constantly in search of a book that makes me feel the way this one does because it fills me with warm feelings. It's not completely escapist. I wasn't sure whether to include completely escapist reads in talking about books that bring comfort, because honestly, I'm not sure that a completely escapist read would bring me comfort right now. It would feel a little bit like hiding or something. I don't know. Tell me if that's a weird thing that only I'm feeling, but I don't want to read a book that is just complete fluff. I need a little bit of substance. I need a little bit of hardship to grab onto. I need that tenacity to overcome. I need that camaraderie that you find in the pages of many books. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, if you haven't read it, do yourself a favor. I get a similar feeling to the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. That is a tongue twister, such a tongue twister. Anyway, I get a similar feeling when I read Louise Penny's books. The first book is Still Life, but I should give fair warning that the series doesn't get really good until the fourth or fifth book, so I'm going to be holding up Bury Your Dead because that's the fifth book in the series. It's the most recent that I've read, actually, and it's the one that really ended up gripping me the most. Having said that, I fell in love with the characters, I fell in love with the town of Three Pines well before this book, but this is the book I feel like you really get invested in kind of the overarching storyline. This follows our main protagonist, Armand Gamache, who is an inspector in the Sûreté, I don't know, whatever the police department is called in Quebec. He finds himself often in a cozy little village. There's a lot of murder that happens in Three Pines, and yet it is a place that you want to live. It's a community of people that you end up falling in love with. It's such a warm series, but once again deals with difficult things, namely murder. But also I know that we're going to start to see Armand Gamache dealing with different kinds of hardships. In this book, he is reeling from a spectacular event that took place off the page, but that you learn about and that he's grappling with through the entire book. Once again, you're getting this cozy feeling, this warm, fill you up kind of vibe in the midst of turmoil. I'm really looking forward to continuing on in the series. Going through, like, feeling the anxiety that I felt over the last few days makes me just want to pick up the next book in the series immediately. But I'm going to resist for another month because I only want to read middle grade during March. Personally, I feel that middle grade books capture this spirit of what I'm talking about better than any other category of books. They are often books about children, but people in general who are going through very difficult things, but are doing it in a way that feels hopeful and resilient. They always leave you filled up rather than emptied out. And I do not want to feel emptied out, but I want life portrayed in a way that is recognizable, and I feel like that is what you get in well done children's lit. So one of the books that I feel like does that the very best is The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is a duology. The War That Saved My Life is the first book in this duology. There's a second book called The War I Finally Won, but I just lent that book out to my mom because I handed these books to her, and encouraged her to read them. She loved this first book, and she came back and requested that I hand over the second book to her immediately. So she has that book, but she returned the first book. This book is about a little girl named Ada who's living once again in World War II. This is a World War II historical fiction novel. I feel like even if you don't like World War II historical fiction, you should still try picking these books up because they don't feel like your typical World War II historical fiction. They're not necessarily dealing directly with the war, right? So in this book, we're following Ada. Ada was born with a clubbed foot. She's living in London with her brother and her mother. Her mother is abusive and is ashamed of her disability. Of course, at this time, there's the threat of the bombing raids of German invasion, and so one of the things that happened in England at the time is they sent all of the children out of London to surrounding cities and the countryside and surrounding cities. And so in this book, Ada makes her way out of the city with her brother, and she finds herself in the care of someone who didn't really want to take in any children, but is forced to because of what is happening in the world. And it's a story of found family. I really love that in this book it doesn't downplay the trauma that Ada has experienced at the hands of her mother. She's clearly been damaged by her mother's neglect and abuse, and a lot of this book is addressing that. You have so much compassion for Ada. You become enveloped in the story of found family. This woman named Susan who takes in these children and learns to love them, and then Ada and her brother who learn to love Susan. Every one of these characters learns to open their heart in new ways, and so once again, these characters are living in this very uncertain, tumultuous time, and yet they are learning to open their lives and their hearts to other people. It is an incredible read. This is another book that I just feel would be such a wonderful choice right now to get lost in. Kate DiCamillo is another author that I always reach for when I want to feel comfort. Reading her books is like being enveloped in a big warm hug. Her books are so inviting, they wrap you up, and yet she also deals with difficult topics. She's a middle grade fiction author, so once again I'm mentioning middle grade. I could mention any one of Kate DiCamillo's books, but I feel like the best books for this cultural moment are her Three Rancheros series. The first one is Raimi Nightingale, the second one is Louisiana's Way Home, and the third one is Beverly Right Here, which I own but haven't read, and I didn't pull it off the shelf, so I'm sorry. The Three Rancheros follows three friends, obviously. There's Raimi, there's Louisiana, and there's Beverly. Each of the books follows the story of each one of these girls. They are companion novels. They're not a series that feels chronologically sequential, although I still would read them in order because you're introduced to all three characters in Raimi Nightingale.
Sorry, I missed that.
Siri thought I was talking to her. In Raimi Nightingale, Raimi is looking for her father. In Louisiana's Way Home, Louisiana lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother has lied to Louisiana her whole life about who her parents are, where she's from, and so Louisiana decides to go on a journey to figure out who she really is and who her parents really are and who her grandmother really is, because in this book her grandmother ends up abandoning her. So I say that, I mean, that's a really tough thing, right? And yet the way that Kate DiCamillo writes about this, the journey that these kids go on never feels bleak. You always feel invited in. You love these characters. You love the people that end up surrounding these characters. The friendship between these girls, especially in Raimi Nightingale, is so beautiful and fun. There's funny moments. I love Kate DiCamillo's writing. I just think she is a treasure and a gem. Like I said, I could have recommended every one of her books, but these feel the most prescient to me in this time. If you really and truly are looking for something that is more escapist, that will just bring you warm, fuzzy feelings without some of that turmoil, and maybe you are, maybe I will be in a month, you know, like I don't know what the world is going to look like in a month, and that's partly what I'm feeling so anxious about. And there may come a time when I just want to return to a story that is pure fiction in terms of its pleasantness. I would highly recommend picking up The Pender Wits by Jean Birdsall. I've said this before, I even said it in probably my most recent video because I've been focusing so much on middle grade because it's middle grade March, but The Pender Wits is my favorite fictional family. This book is the epitome of cozy, and it's the epitome of like family togetherness. This first book in the series of 5 books tells the story of 5 sisters, the Pender Wits sisters. They are spending their summer vacation at an estate called Arundel. Did I say 5 sisters? I meant 4 sisters. Anyway, each one of these sisters is so different. They all have their own individual personality, and the way Jean Birdsall writes these personality is filled with whimsy. When I say whimsy, I don't mean strangeness. I mean more, there's a word that I'm trying to think of that I can't think of, and it's really gonna bother me. Like inviting. It's a word for inviting when people have not charismatic. Anyway, I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of, but basically all I'm trying to say is this family, this story, this world that Jean Birdsall has created is completely absorbing and inviting. It will bring a smile to your face and warmth into your heart. It just makes you glow from within. I love this story. If you are looking for a story like the Pender Wits, but that maybe has some more diversity in it, I would recommend The Vanderbeeks of 141st Street by Karina Jan Glaser. Similarly, this tells the story about a family that's very close-knit. This family lives in Harlem, and this first story, this is also another series, and this first story takes place the week before Christmas. The Vanderbeeks family has found out that their landlord is going to kick them out of their home, and they are trying to devise a way to stay because they don't want to leave. I feel like it is so similar to the Pender Wits in so many ways. Personally, I like the Pender Wits a little bit better, but the Vanderbeeks is still absolutely a delight to read. And like I said, it does have some more diversity in it, so it has that aspect going for it. Finally, one more author that I would recommend reading just because I can't read his books without laughing hysterically. Who in this world doesn't need to laugh when they feel like the world is falling apart? Laughing is one of the only ways that we can get through this. We can't just all be feeling tense all the time or we will just go mad. My 2 favorite books that he's written are Notes from a Small Island, which is one of his travel memoirs in which he travels around England, and it's hysterically funny. I know I've said this before, but I first read this when my parents and I traveled to England together. My mom handed me this book to read, and I read it on the way over and then while we were traveling around. I remember sitting in Heathrow Airport and laughing out loud at how funny this book was. I love it. And then my other favorite book that Bill Bryson has written is called The Mother Tongue, English and How It Got That Way. So Bill Bryson is most known for his travel writing and then sort of his more informational writing, and this falls into that second category. This book is about the English language, and it's fascinating, and it's incredibly readable, and once again, it is hysterically funny. I don't know how he can take any subject and make it interesting and funny, but he does it, and he does it well. And his use of the English language has always impressed me. There's just so much to absorb you and distract you in his books. So, and now I want to pick up Bill Bryson because he does a great job distracting me. So friends, that was a huge stack of books. Some of them are connected. All of them are either filled with hope or humor or warmth. They will fill up your heart. They will tend to your soul in these uncertain times. And I hope that you pick one of these books up if you are feeling as anxious as I am. Because friends, right now, we need each other and we need books. I have a really good friend on Instagram who said the wisest words yesterday that I have been clinging to since then. And that is that as bookworms, we can take a collective deep breath and remember that if stories have taught us anything, it is that facing the unknown and living wholeheartedly are not mutually exclusive. So thank you so much, Charlotte, for those words because they meant so much to me in hearing. And I have no idea if Charlotte even watches my videos, but that meant so much to me, and I hope that it means something to you. Cling on to hope, my friends. Live fearlessly. And that doesn't mean live dangerously or expose yourself to this virus or expose the people that you love to this virus. But it does mean that we should not live in fear and that we should cling to hope Because what is hope if we aren't clinging to it in times of strife? Hope doesn't mean anything in times of ease. Hope is for such a time as this. And as my favorite character, Anne Shirley, says in Anne of Avonlea, that is one good thing about this world. There are always sure to be more springs. With that, friends, I hope that this video finds you well. Please reach out if you need to. Let's lean on each other during these times of uncertainty, during these times of fear, and let's cling to hope together. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to stick around, so please feel free to subscribe if you haven't. Please like this video. I would love to get to know you, so let's talk in the comments. Let me know what books bring you hope and comfort in times like this, in times of strife. I'll talk to you later, friends. Bye.